Okay, welcome everyone. This webinar is again um, will focus on strategies for effective executive sponsorship for adaptive courseware. My name is Kelvin Bentley, and I currently serve as a digital learning consultant to the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. This webinar is really just designed to provide more information about some great work that's being done right now amongst many colleges and universities to really help learners have more of a personalized learning experience through the use of adaptive courseware and digital learning initiatives globally. I'm really excited to just introduce our guest speakers today. Dr. Laura Niesen de Abruna from York College of Pennsylvania is the current provost there. And she currently serves or has served as the immediate past president for the Association of Chief Academic Officers. And also serves as the principal investigator for the ACAO's Digital Fellows Project, supported in part by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so we have, actually, Julie, if you could bring up the, Julie, if you could just bring up the, yes, thank you. So, and so as I was saying, we have guest speakers. And so we also have, in addition, Dr. Maricela Rodriguez, who serves as the provost and vice president for academic affairs of Laredo College, and also Dr. Gregory Ochoa, the dean of academic affairs for West Virginia University, Potomac State College. And what we like to do is, again, just provide an opportunity for our guest speakers to share some of the great work that they're doing. What I'd like to do is first, again, introduce Dr. de Abruna from York College of Pennsylvania, for her to spend a little bit more time talking about the academic, the Association of Chief Academic Officers project called the Digital Learning Fellows Project. So Laura, could you tell us maybe a little bit more about the project, how you came up with the idea for it, and just some of the key elements of the work of the Digital Fellows Project that you could share with everyone?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kelvin. In 2017, a representative from the Gates Foundation approached me in my role as the president of ACAO, and he said he had just read an article about the role of provosts in fostering change and innovation in higher education. And he had an idea, which was, could there be a substantive role for chief academic officers in affecting change in the digital area? And he specifically was interested in the role of adaptive digital courseware in increasing the pass rates or lowering the DFWI rates of students who are in their first 60 hours of undergraduate programming. And he was also interested in specifically helping students who were at institutions and they had high Pell eligibility. The students themselves they were interested in were first generation, for example, low income and minority. And he asked me if I would put together a program to facilitate that connection. So I thought about it, and what I did was model that on the ACE Fellows program, which lasts a year. Ours actually lasted a little bit longer. It was almost 2 years. in which chief academic officers would have a variety of opportunities to gain their own professional understanding of digital learning and digital courseware, and then go to their own institutions, find faculty champions. They were to decide on a vendor for adaptive digital courseware in one of their gateway courses, and then try to launch a pilot in one of the courses that was multi-sectioned. So launch a pilot in at least one section of a course that had multiple sections, and then see if there was a difference in the DWFI rates. And so we did that, and I got together with what I called my senior leadership group, and it included a large number of influential people in this digital learning space, such as John O'Brien from EDUCAUSE and John Gardner from the First Year Institute. And we put out a call for fellows. We were able to get a pretty healthy group together, and we selected 32 individuals. So we were pretty proud of ourselves. The 32 were 16 men and 16 women. I didn't fudge it to get that way. It just fell out that way. There were 23 four-year institutions and 9 community colleges, 2 state systems, 6 HSIs, 2 HBCUs, 5 private not-for-profits, and 2 private for-profits. So we were attempting really to look at mostly the public sector, and that was intentional because the foundation felt that that's where the most at-risk students are, or the largest number of at-risk students, I should put it that way. And we ended up with fellows from all across the country. They were not concentrated in the Northeast, as you often find with these fellowship programs, but they really spanned. We had people from Alaska and Texas and Nevada, Georgia, Florida, Washington State, as well as Washington, DC. We put out pilots in these institutions. And about a year later, we collected final reports on how all of that operated. And I will give you a sort of thumbnail here, and then we're going to hear from 2 of my favorite fellows, and then I'll come back with a couple of takeaways. But let me just give you a few more pieces of information about this. At the end of this, the 32 chief academic officers engaged the program in 84 courses, 103 faculty members participated, and 7,500 students were affected by this experiment. And by far, the major metric that we have is that at most institutions, the DFW rate went down, the pass rate went up. So there could be a more scientifically rigorous study. I assume somebody's going to look at this as an academic dissertation or a book, but provosts like me and deans and others oftentimes are looking for emerging high impact practices. And I think this one may be one of them. 2 more short points, Kelvin, before we move on. In addition to all of those students who were affected, all of our chief academic officers have told us that they're going to continue this project at their institution. And that when we counted up how much additional money was put into digital initiatives at these institutions, it was combined $8.1 million. This is what we call the multiplier effect. Because chief academic officers sit at the president's cabinet and are influential in putting the budget together, we were able as a group to influence an additional amount of money going into these initiatives. And that really was the intention of the foundation, that this would seed further contributions that would come from inside higher education. And then the last thing I'll say before we hear from our fellows is that sometimes you think that the provost role is pretty volatile. And indeed it is. We know that from working on the Association of Chief Academic Officers. What I was very careful to do was to engage the presidents of these 32 institutions. And out of the 32 chief academic officers who started with me in 2017, there are only 19 now who are still in their positions. But whether we had people in and out of positions, the institutions kept that commitment. And the chief academic officers who came into those positions were interested in moving this forward. So yes, there's a lot of volatility in this position, but when you use the position as leverage to embed an engagement in that institution, I think this still is a very important lever to play. I guess you push levers, right? You don't play them. So, Kelvin, back to you if you want to get a little bit more information from our fellows.
Laura, thank you so much for that overview. You covered a lot in a very short period of time, just in terms of, again, highlighting the importance of targeting, academic leaders and, educating them more about the benefits of, leveraging digital technologies to impact students. So not just embracing technology for technology's sake, but to really be laser focused on, how can we improve student success? And it's a great project. When I first learned about the ACO project, I was amazed by the fact that to me at the time, it didn't seem like there was really any other project of its type in the several years that I've been in higher education. So kudos to you for working with the Gates Foundation and for them to recognize that it's a very special project that you had in mind. So with that, let's what I'd like to do is shift over to Maricela and Greg, again, academic leaders at their respective institutions. And maybe we'll start with Maricela. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about your experience as being a digital fellow? What was it like for you? What were things that you took away from the experience that helped your institution?
Hello, everybody. This is Marisa Rodriguez, and like Laura said, I wasn't an original digital fellow. My former boss was, and so I transitioned. I didn't join them on the first meeting, but needless to say, it was an easy transition for me because we already had been having a lot of discussions, and actually our digital learning task force committee, we would meet every week and get what my former boss would send us in regards to review of literature that came from the Digital Fellows Program, and then additional information. And this committee consisted of people from the academic side, workforce side, research and planning, i.e. institutional effectiveness, leaders. So obviously, when you're trying to institutionalize, you need a lot of players in this. And needless to say, at first, there was a little resistance into this new foreign teaching strategy that some were advocates of it, some weren't familiar in regards to faculty. But the more that we learned about it, and then definitely designing our pilot study, and then now it's growing to where now it's institutionalized, it's been a great experience for me. So I have nothing but good things to say about it.
Okay, thank you so much, Maricela. And Greg, what about you? What was it like for you to participate in the Digital Fellows project, and what were some initial ideas, takeaways from the project that you had given the experience?
Right. Well, hello everybody. My name is Greg Ochoa, and I just wanted to share a little bit. In addition to it had an impact. The Digital Fellows Program and project had an impact on my professional life. In addition to the learning of all the details and new information about digital learning and pedagogy that we learned in each of the convenings, one of the unexpected benefits of the program was the relationship building with a group of other chief academic officers from all over the country at different types of institutions. I still have a connection with many of those fellows, and we have this network. As a chief academic officer, sometimes you don't have that sounding board that you can talk to, somebody that you can run an issue by or ask a question that you couldn't really, either somebody that reports to you or to your president. So that was a great benefit. In addition, because of the Fellows Project, I'm currently on the board of the Association for Chief Academic Officers and chair the Membership and Communications Committee, and that has been an incredible learning opportunity. Just real briefly, I'll share a little bit about the project that we chose. And like Laura said, we looked at gateway courses and with high DFW rates. And so we looked at our biology, or intro biology courses. And they were using a product, they were using a book from McGraw-Hill. And we became aware of a product they had, a digital adaptive courseware called Connect. And so that was what we used for our trial. We did one section of Biology 101, and it was used as a homework assignment. And we did see an increase of students that were passing the course, but we also saw a 9% decrease in the withdrawal rate in that one section. I'll talk a little bit later about where we went with it, because, well, I'll just share that was in the fall of 2017. In the spring of 2018, in the fall of 2018, we added that Connect to all sections, that we carried it on and grew to all sections with 101 and Biology 102. And we continued to see an increase similar to our initial findings. More than 90% of the students earned a 70% or higher. And then we had a much lower rate of students withdrawing or getting the DF repeats in the eyes. So I will share a little bit later, but it was just an incredible program, not only for myself and my professional development, but you'll hear where we're going now in the future, what we've added in other areas on campus.
No, thank you for that, Greg. And maybe before we hear a little bit more about some of the work also at Maricela's institution, South Texas College, Greg, could you maybe, it's always interesting when you do a pilot, right? Because, you have some initial data, and if things go well, there's excitement. If things don't go so well, it could actually, increase some of the concerns and worries about, using a tool to help students. But could you maybe speak a little bit about, maybe some of those fears, some of those challenges that you had with going from a pilot to, also, scaling it beyond a pilot? What were some of the challenges you faced, and how did you, what work did you have to do in your role as an academic leader to, kind of be that executive sponsor, respect other people's opinions, but still move the project forward?
Right, that's a very good point. One of the challenges we had, as you say, when you're trying to do a pilot, is getting, and then trying to grow, and how do we scale it, was faculty buy-in, and you kind of hit at that. And the best thing that I did as part of the Digital Fellows Project, in addition to the funding from the grant that paid for travel and got us to the convenings, there was also some money that we were given to help in our project. And one of the ways I used that money, I did my own version of a faculty digital fellow on my campus. So I opened it up, similar to how we applied as chief academic officers, that Laura was explaining. I did an announcement, explained what it was, and gave it as an opportunity for professional growth for faculty. And from the people that applied, I actually did that prior to deciding what we were going to use as biology, because the person who was the faculty fellow, she actually was the chair of that division and also was in biology. And so having her as the chair and part of that program, it really helped with the buy-in from the faculty, because it wasn't just per se an administrator saying, here's another new idea that we'd like to try, and here's why we should do it. I had a faculty person, Laura talked about that champion, and that's, I would highly recommend. And I know Maricela talked about getting that task force she had, where you get faculty on board and you get those early faculty adopters and champions. One of the other things, so one of the other areas that we were working on prior to my becoming a fellow was our math department. The state of West Virginia had decided that we would no longer have developmental courses. So for example, we had a developmental math course, which was a no credit math. And so we had to work with a way to bring those people that would have been developmental into the first level math course. And what the math department did, and where we added what's called, it's called Hawks. And it's similar to Alex, the courseware from the vendor, but it follows a pattern where it's teaching students to learn it, practice it, and then master, and they can go with their own rate. And one of the issues we had when we implemented that, and we've analyzed what we've done, analyzed progress, listened to the students, and revised it throughout the last 2 years. And one of the complaints we had from students is they felt they weren't being taught, even though we had a faculty in the room and it was a computer lab. And so one of the ways we change that is, the faculty's in the room with them, the faculty spends time based on the results of where the students are and where they see they may be having problems, does a mini lecture about that, it does some practice with everybody, and then is in the room helping individually. So learning that feedback and getting the faculty, but the faculty in the math department have really owned that, and really have some buy-in to make that successful. The other thing they did this year is everybody in that first level math, in addition to what I just explained, they've been assigned almost like success coaches, which could be math faculty, but we got buy-in from faculty across the campus that came, and we had a celebration and welcomed them when it first started. But then they have that individual person to help them stay on track, because these are high-risk students. So there's another person beyond the instructor that follows up and makes sure they're going to class and they're keeping up with their assignments. That's how we address those two different challenges.
No, Greg, thank you so much. While you were speaking, we received a question about, in addition to leveraging the technology that you used, the adaptive courseware, did you do other things, right, to help your students? And so your last example with the math course, in terms of the introduction of success coaches, is great. Did anything else happen with the course itself? Were any of the biology or math courses changed in terms of, like, pedagogically, as a function of you using the tools that you used?
Yes, and actually it's still evolved. So I'm in the middle, as everybody who's a chief academic officer can relate. We're starting the whole process of faculty evaluations for the year. And I was just reviewing actually the person that was our digital fellow, my campus digital fellow, and in her bio class that she does that with, two things. Number one, the product allows you to see the back end of where students are, where they're struggling. And what she does is looks at that information and that data that the program supplies, and then gears her next class to maybe review something that they're not getting, or spend more time on something that's a little more difficult. And then one of the other things she did to help them, based on what she was seeing that she learned from using the program, she now has a quiz once a week. And the quiz is to help them, is to try to make sure they're reading and keeping up. But what she was finding, they may be doing the work throughout the semester, but then they were waiting to the end to do all the reading and cramming. And this way it kind of chunks each quiz if they're preparing and they're reading. And she can see real time who's actually in there and who's spending time doing the extra work and the extra practice. And then she can also address it on an individual basis. So yes.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Maricela, what about you? Could you tell us maybe a little bit more about, again, some of the work that you're doing at STC to, again, leverage adaptive courseware in some of your courses, or some of your future plans to do so?
Sure. Well, I'm going to correct you. I'm at Laredo College, not South Texas College, but that's okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Definitely in the South Texas region. So, but in Laredo College. But needless to say, we reviewed, as Laura said, we reviewed our DFWI rates, particularly in the introductory courses that not only academic students, but also workforce students take, since in Texas, our workforce programs, associate degree, they have to take 15 general ed courses. And needless to say, in the top 20 high attrition courses, we saw a lot of social and behavioral classes and humanities, very few with science and math, which was very different. I've been here at my college for 13 years, and that was not the case, 10 years ago. You saw more of the STEM. So back then, STEM started trying to do a lot of innovative techniques to try to impact those success rates. But one of the things that, and a lot of it was due to a lot of funding that we got through grants through the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Department of Education. But one of the things that we kept seeing was the repeated high attrition courses for the government courses and the history courses. And so needless to say, we wanted not necessarily not focus on STEM, but now focus in another area that we hadn't really, thought of, or not that they weren't doing exploratory teaching strategies, but the focus and reviewing of data and the analytics had not been done. So needless to say, to get a new broad faculty in another area to start reviewing different teaching strategies and using analytics, I would say was at first a challenge, because one of the misconceptions faculty had, and I'm sure in most higher ed institutions, is digital tools going to replace my job? And so one of the things is to explain, first of all, what digital tools do. And luckily I was a biology instructor, so I explained how, 10 years ago, those digital tools using Pearson products helped me assigning some of those digital tools as pre-lecture assignments helped me facilitate my lecture courses during the week a whole lot better, because now students, not that they memorized, the information, but they became familiar with it. So my lectures, I was able to see where students were struggling with, and that helped facilitate my lecture. So having that teaching experience also, and then exploring my personal, take on digital tools and how that helped, then kind of started changing the dynamic and bringing a lot of, looking at different, like I said earlier, part of it was just reviewing literature as far as how digital tools facilitate. And then after a while, the social and behavioral department faculty started seeing, how that could impact their courses. And then we left it up to them to bring in, with the help of the e-learning team or center, to bring in different, I believe they had 5 representatives come in and educate them on the different types of digital tools. And they took it upon themselves to choose the adaptive courseware, just like the STEM had in the past. And so they decided to use Norton Inquisitive in the history and government classes. The nice thing about it is that we had pilot faculty. However, in the decision of the course where it was the majority of the faculty, let's say the majority of the history faculty and the majority of the government faculty, that both decided to use that particular software and saw, you know, how it could help students. And but in the task force, we had also identified what generally, like if this were to go on a grander scale, what are some of the things as a whole we're going to be looking at and implementing into the classroom. We mimicked a lot of what we did in digital learning, a lot on how we implemented Quality Matters for online courses. Now it's a full implementation for our college. And with that rubric, not that it was a very detailed rubric on the digital learning, but we had a framework, we had elements, and it was all faculty driven on what they thought a digital learning course would look like. And the reason I say that is because, you know, sometimes others may say, well, I use Canvas, which is a learning management system, so that's my digital tool. And there's a difference in that learning management versus a digital tool, you know, that utilizes adaptive software. So it was important with the faculty help that we define what digital learning meant at the college. You know, I think that's the first thing that I would recommend to leaders is first, let faculty define, you know, what that digital learning looks like, and also what are important elements. Not obviously telling people how to teach, you know, or you know, getting into the whole academic freedom, but it's to faculty at our college. What pride are we going to take in defining digital learning? Because we realize, you know, you search so much on digital learning, everybody's going to have a different definition of what that means. And so it was important to get faculty to contribute to that discussion, define it, define the small rubric, I would say, elements on what defines digital learning at the college. And then from there, as faculty started exploring the courseware, they found more buy-in and more into what they were going to, I think the way I would explain my role is just facilitating the questions, but letting them answer, you know, what digital learning meant for the college. And I think having those productive, healthy conversations, you know, led to the pilot work that was conducted for the digital fellows. And then from there, exploring, hey, this worked. A lot of students, you know, more than anything, students and faculty, when they were surveyed, both had positive feedback. I mean, a lot of our surveys were anywhere from 85% and up on the positive feedback that we had. And so as a leader, I mean, what more do you want when both the student and the faculty are driven in making that? Because if the data had been different, let's say students were positive about it, but faculty, it was tough for them to build these digital tools, well then, you know, you want a balance, you know, between the perception of students and faculty. And so that's important to us too, is making sure that the positive learning of the facilitating of teaching and the learning is both happening. That's a win-win for us. And so needless to say, the pilot kept growing. Now we have doubled our digital fellows group in the social and behavioral science. And also it was voted recently, our college just went up for reaffirmation. And part of the SAC COC is to have a quality enhancement plan. And I'm not sure if Laura knows about it, but it is now a plan for the next 5 years of our campus to work on digital learning. And so it's nice that our pilot fellows are now the mentors to the new faculty. And it's just an ongoing, you know, conversation and implementation that faculty take ownership on how, once again, they identify the courseware that they want to do, and two, is it personalized for the student learning, and is it going to give us the data analytics that on a broad perspective, you know, we're looking for.
No, that's excellent, Maricela. It's great to hear that your use of adaptive courseware and And also I think you touched on something that's very important. It is a process, right? So it's not just about, as an academic leader, you don't really get a lot of traction when you tell someone you're going to use this particular tool in your course, right? I mean, it's a give and take. As an academic leader, though, you do have, you have some respect, some hopefully a certain level of trust, because you have come up through the ranks as a faculty member yourself. But then it's also giving time for faculty to have that ongoing conversation so that they feel that they are not just a part of the process, but they are in key ways driving the process, right? To select the right tools. But then even before that, as you said, it was important to define, okay, what is digital learning? What is an adaptive learning tool? It's not a learning management system, right? That it actually has bells and whistles that are very different, that can be leveraged in part to help students. There's one question that I will kind of just throw out to both you and Greg. At your respective institutions, what about the issue of cost? I mean, I know that's also a big concern of all of us, making sure that we are selecting tools that are appropriately priced for students. And that's a challenge, right? Like, we want to obviously pick tools that are helpful, but also, not cost prohibitive. So maybe Maricela, we'll start with you. How has that been a part of your ongoing conversations with the faculty?
Yes, thank you for asking. Actually, right now I'm working with, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the Allinclusive, and I'm working with the bookstore, and pretty much have the commitment from all publishers that once you go through the digital ebook aspect, there's, and what all-inclusive means is that when a student registers for a digital class, that the resources would automatically be tied into our learning management, which is Canvas. And what we're piloting right now, since we got funding to work with our pilot, we got funding from Follett. So these students that register into this course are going to get their resources for free. But in the legwork on the background, IT is programming to where these students would have been charged, let's say, a course fee or a book fee, and it would be tallied up to their tuition and fee. But certainly students legally have to be able to opt out of the all-inclusive process if they choose to get their resources out there. But the reason a lot of faculty are pushing that is because, part of student success is the struggles of having students have their resources on day one. And so with this process, we're hoping to fully implement it. And it has a lot of advantage. One, that the students will have the resources on day one, and two, that all the publishers have claimed that going in this route, their prices would drop by 50%. And we just recently had Pearson come in also and keep reiterating that. And so now we're running a campaign, well, seeing the results of pilot, right, of the pilot, making sure that the technology background works, but also doing the marketing, with faculty about what this all-inclusive entails, and more so with our student body, so that, educating them on the opt-out, but if you opt in, these are the advantages for you, and cost would definitely be part of that campaign. So we're recently working on that, but I know a lot of colleges have that full implementation.
No, that's great that you're working on that model. What about you, Greg? What are you noticing about some of the conversations around cost in terms of picking some of the tools that you're using at your institution?
Right. So I currently have a retention advisory board, and we are actually looking at, it was just recommended what Maricela just talked about. So I will be in touch with Maricela to see how that's working out. But with the product that we chose, one of the benefits from it, so again, the Connect product, we've worked with the publisher. We can get the student can get the digital version of the textbook with access to the courseware, and it's less than $100. And then prior to that, if they were getting the courseware and the book, the fee for that, the cost was over $200, almost $300. So we talk to the students about the benefit of this courseware. And, you know, we always hear, if you're a student who wants to have the actual paper in front of you, the publisher will work with us for about $20. They'll do it's almost like a paper version, not a hard textbook, but a paper version. So that's how right now we're working, because we're also trying, most of our students at Potomac State College, about 60% of our students are Pell Grant eligible. So we're very attuned to trying to lower those textbook costs. Some of the benefits of having that faculty fellow, she did presentations to all the faculty. And one of the things that came up just this year, our English, again, we have no developmental English course. So when they worked on it, they have English 101, but the students that would have tested into developmental are in a lab studio 100 class, and they need an extra time period. And just this year, they're now using the Hawks digital course, the courseware with those students, because again, it helps them practice more, gives them examples until they're certified mastery. So we're very attuned to that, but we definitely are trying to look at how to do that all inclusive. We've had faculty on their own trying to look at some of the open education resources, and there's some of those that are out there that come with some adaptive videos and courseware built into it. So that's how we're doing it right now.
Okay, Greg, thank you, and Maricela, thank you both for again sharing the great work that you're both doing at your institutions. Again, your candor is very helpful, and just in terms of again figuring out soup to nuts how to really do this work in the right ways, engaging faculty, and and really finding the best ways to provide them the opportunities to lead this conversation with you. Laura, given the fact that you had the opportunity to attract so many great academic leaders throughout the country to join the Digital Fellows Project, obviously in your role you've been able to really see common themes in terms of the work that they've been doing, maybe again key challenges, next steps that they're taking. Could you maybe share the things that you are observing, given the given your role as the principal investigator for the project?
Yeah, thanks, Kelvin. One of my roles at this point is to do exactly what you asked about, which is to bring together what we've learned about this engagement and contextualize it in what's going on elsewhere in the digital learning circle. And one point that I wanted to make sure everybody knew about is that ACAO's Digital Fellows Project is part of a larger network called Every Learner Everywhere. And in that partnership, there are 12 other members and 11 other members besides ACAO, Achieving the Dream, which is focused on community colleges, APLU, and Kelvin, you're representing APLU today, Digital Promise Global, OLC, Titan Partners, WCET, EdSurge, Intentional Futures, EDUCAUSE, and South by Southwest EDU. And what that entire network is doing now with the support of the Gates Foundation is to look at something a little bit different from what ACAO was looking at. That group is looking at what's called technical assistance. So trying to approach institutions not through the leadership, but really at a more median level, and talked to directors of centers for teaching and learning and directly to faculty about how to get digital learning up and running. What ACAO is doing, and I still think this is the only organization that's focused on this, is whether that, to go back to that lever, whether the project that I engaged in of bringing leadership to the forefront and moving this forward is important or not. And the major takeaway for me, and it was a takeaway for all of the fellows, is that that was extremely important in moving an institution forward. And I think this is a moment of transformation where I'd like to reiterate the importance of having the chief academic officer, and as I mentioned, the president too, committed to digital learning as one of the things that they're going to be interested in and hopefully get into their strategic plan. So I think as we become granular and we look at the different parts of how this is operating, there are a lot of other takeaways, but I wanted to start with that, the importance of leadership in moving this forward, getting that multiplier effect. I think Laredo College was a wonderful example of how that can move forward with the proper leadership. So Maricela, I want to congratulate you and also your boss, Vince, who's now a president, by the way, in moving this forward with your institution, because you describe such a stellar example of what is going on at a lot of institutions, including Greg's and others among the fellows. So that's a major takeaway for me. And then, Kelvin, I don't know if you want me to mention some other takeaways.
Yes, I think we have time. And then what we'll do is we'll then shift into question and answer, the Q&A period after that.
Okay, great. So importance of leadership is number one for me. Number two, in reading all of the final reports, everybody talked about the importance of faculty engagement, and Kelvin, you addressed that as well as the two fellows. The one fellow who was not successful in the project indicated that her major mistake was really a leadership management mistake, and that was tying this effort too closely to herself. So having the faculty take this on, which you saw at Laredo very early on with Vince having a group of faculty who are working on this, that's essential for moving the needle on digital courseware. The other takeaway, which was very interesting, is the role of the CIO and the role of IT. And we all reflected on the fact that 10, 20 years ago, IT had a very different role on campus, and the CIO had a very different role. And if you remember what was going on in the early days, it was about the technology, and it was about the hardware, and it was about getting the buildings wired. And then it was about getting everything, ready for Wi-Fi. And as we put our toes into digital learning and instructional design, it was really coming through the CIO's office. And now there seems to be a movement either to bring those two leaders together or to have IT report to the chief academic officer. So we've sort of explored this at EDUCAUSE as well. And what people are finding is that a real partnership between the CIO and the CAO and all the people who report to them, which is focused on digital learning and instructional backup for how students are learning in the 21st century, is really the way to go. And I think that our program really brought CIOs together with CAOs. We had a special conference at EDUCAUSE that brought the chief officers together in those two roles. And there's a lot of good energy and a lot of good understanding there. So we don't see as much of a silo between those two areas. So another takeaway is the importance of the institutional context and culture when you're trying to bring in digital learning. So you may have an institution that thinks that the learning management system is digital learning, which it's not. It's a nice tool, but if you have an institution at that point, or you still have faculty who are reluctant, if not hostile, to online learning in and of itself, irrespective of whether it's adaptive or not, you need to have somebody, I think really at this level, the chief academic officer level, who empowers either somebody who reports to them and signals to the institution that this is a major priority, or the president who signals this is a major priority to get that moving. Otherwise, people will have a tendency towards inertia to keep teaching the way they've always taught, which is not online, particularly with the faculty that we have, many of whom came through the PhD in the late 80s, let's say, and did not have the benefit of teaching online when they were graduate students. So understanding the institutional context and culture before you go out there with these sorts of initiatives is important. And if you can make them part of the strategic plan for the institution, you can sort of plan in a way that's very effective. We talked a little bit about the cost for the students, and that has to be a conversation with the CFO on campus. And you have to understand whether you, as a campus, like our campus, is going to absorb these costs into the operating budget, not send them back out to the students in terms of fees. If your institution can afford to do that, I think that's a tremendous opportunity. The bookstores don't like it, but I think it's a win-win for academic affairs and the students. So I think that those are some of the major takeaways that I have. I think it really sheds a light on the importance of leadership, the importance of working with the faculty, and the importance of working hand in glove with the CIO. Those would be my major observations. You know, we're going to write something up when I finish the project itself in March of 2019, which will give more information on this and a little bit more data. What's next, and I'll finish by answering your final question, Kelvin, which is, what do you see as the next step, or what do you see as the next most important conversation? And that's the conversation about learning analytics. So what are we learning on a student by student basis as we move through digital adaptive courseware, and particularly if you're also using some other sort of retention software as an instructor at the same time? What are you learning? And then how do you accumulate that for a course by course look? And then how do you look at it from a larger point of view from advising? And then really, what are we as a community finding in terms of learning analytics that are going to help this move forward? B, and A is really convince our colleagues who are skeptical, wherever they are, that this actually is something that is going to move forward, and it's not another MOOC. It's not something that has overstated its ability to transform higher education, but that this has genuine and observable potential to help students learn better.
Laura, thank you so much for that overview. Again, lots of, I mean, we could really spend separate webinars on each of those separate points. I think what you said too about really engaging the faculty, other leaders on campus, the CIO, the CFO, you know, it made me also think about like the accessibility office as well, right? So as you are, you know, working to bring in new technology, making sure that it is, you know, ADA compliant before moving forward. I mean, that's also very important too. We have a couple minutes left for Q&A. Again, before we get into Q&A, I'd just like to, again, thank all of our guest speakers today. You guys did a great job just, again, providing lots of helpful information for everyone. So thank you for that. There was a question from Arthur Friedrich. You know, how do you craft the conversation around the lost institutional revenue that results from lost bookstore sales commissions? And so I see, Laura, I think you've kind of responded in the Q&A chat box there. Would you like to maybe just quickly highlight what you wrote just for our recording today?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, at our institution, and I can only speak for our institution in terms of moving this forward, I've had to socialize the president's cabinet, and I think it needs to be at that level with the president and the CFO in the room, and also our retention officer, our student success office, and talk about digital adaptive courseware as being a retention tool that was going to help us to save money. And as we've tracked this, and we've been able to see the difference in individual courses in chemistry and math, we've been able to make the case that this helps with retention. Our retention, and you can't make a one-on-one, I mean, you can't prove direct causality, but this is one of the things that we've done, which has moved our retention rate from 79% to 81.5%. And so we tend to allocate funding to tools that are working in that direction. My staff seems to think that this is helping us with retention. Then as you're looking at that number, you can obviously monetize that number and bring that back to cabinet as a savings, which would replace any auxiliary income, which is coming from bookstore sales. And we work with Barnes and Noble, so that auxiliary income is not completely our revenue. We've always had to share it with an outside vendor. So, and to be frank, we're only working with math and chemistry at this point, and you're generally just working with the first 2 years. So it's not as if you're taking a big chunk out of the bookstore, money. And what we've done is say, this is going to be an expense that academic affairs is going to absorb as part of our retention initiatives. And we'll make that work within the budget without having to add, we don't want to add another fee to our students because we also have a lot of Pell eligible students. I'd rather work within the operating budget to shift things around.
Sorry about that. Looks like we have just a couple minutes left. I think unless there are no more questions, I think I'd like to again just thank our guest speakers for a great conversation. Again, I almost feel like we could have a week-long discussion, hearing from from additional folks like yourselves who are doing this great work. Again, I think one of the key things that I took away from today is that, again, it involves a very team-focused approach, right? It doesn't come down to one person, even in your respective roles as academic leaders to do this. It really involves ongoing conversations with the faculty, with other leaders, and collecting the data. What Laura, what you mentioned before about leveraging the data to help make the case for you in terms of student retention, student success, as Maricela and Greg also highlighted, is key, right? Above everything else, we're here for student success. And so the more that we can tie it to that, the better. So again, thank you all. Laura, again, is the current provost at the York College of Pennsylvania, immediate past president and chair of nominations for the Association of Chief Academic Officers. Maricela Rodriguez is the provost and vice president of academic affairs of Laredo College. And Greg Ochoa is the Dean of Academic Affairs for West Virginia University, Potomac State College. So thank you all. We will have some additional webinars coming up as we start a new year soon, which is kind of crazy to think about. So please continue to follow us here on Twitter. We have our Twitter feed for the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, as well as following the Twitter feed for the Every Learner Everywhere initiative that we also highlighted today. So again, thank you. And today's recording will be available in the coming days. And so we will be sharing that out. Please also, before you leave the room today, please complete our survey. Tell us what you think about this topic and how we can present it to you in new ways. We'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you all and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maricela.